Three parts to the speech. First, setup. Secondly, why this is morally good. And thirdly, why it is more harmful to not be born a centrist. First, two parts to setup. What we think a centrist looks like. I think it looks like two things. First, that these people can probably see both sides, not wedded to a certain idea, are on average more likely to be able to switch beliefs than your average person with political beliefs. But secondly of all, they still have political opinions. For example, we think this manifests in a way of an individual perhaps choosing to vote for Biden instead of Trump in the upcoming American elections, because Biden is more close to the center. Just because you have more centrist political beliefs does not mean they're completely non-existent. Second part to set up, what we think it looks like to have strongly held political beliefs. Two things. First, I think it means that your entire social circle is largely constructed around it. This is for the reason that when you're highly motivated about politics and highly involved in politics, these just do tend to be your circle of friends because these are the activities that you're doing on your weekend. But second of all, probably means you are comparatively not as happy with changing ideas or comparatively not as happy being able to see other sides of political debate. First, on principle, why it is morally better to be born a centrist. Two parts to this argument. First, it is proving that no one view is inherently better. So it is better to be more able to switch between rationalizing different political beliefs. This is for the reason that both right-wing and left-wing views in many modern political debates don't necessarily have a clear answer as to what is necessarily the right path. For example, on issues like immigration, some people who have more right-wing beliefs might believe it is better to prioritize the people living in your own country versus a lot of people who have more left-wing beliefs thinking that we owe an obligation to help those who are wanting to come into our country. There's not an inherently clear answer to a lot of these questions. So it is not necessarily a morally correct thing to do to be able to condemn people who have political beliefs that are not necessarily your own. Secondly, a lot of very educated people and very educated people who are involved in politics tend to have more centrist beliefs, which indicates that it is often something that people who are very educated and well informed about politics are likely to engage in. For example, they're educated and intelligent, wealthy, political pundits like Hillary Clinton, who are semi on the left or more centrist, or even right-wing ones like Sam Harris, which indicates that generally this is something that people who care, who know about politics, generally agree with. The impact of this principal argument is that it is wrong to condemn people for having political beliefs that are not necessarily their own, because there is not a clear answer. And comparatively, if you are a centrist against someone with strongly held political beliefs, it's far more likely you are going to condemn and shame people for having beliefs that are different to your own, because you are so invested in your own outlook of the world. It is all you're exposed to in your entire social circle. So it is likely that even if you don't understand or haven't read as much on the issue of say if you're a super strong right-wing person and you don't understand much about the left-wing perspective, you're still likely to condemn them anyway, which is a morally harmful thing to do. Second argument then of why you will be happier. There are parts to this argument, but noting at the top of this that this is an incredibly high impact argument because you don't know what the interests of this person are. It's not entirely clear that a lot of the activities that one has to engage in if you're a highly politically motivated person are necessarily going to be helpful with these people, but also because are going to prove to you that being heavily involved in politics is often incredibly corrosive and damaging to your life, which is the highest, as an active debate, a highest impact in this debate. First reason to this is you're more likely to develop more meaning on the comparative of being a centrist for two reasons. First, it's easier to make friends with people who do not have the same political beliefs as you, because you are not someone who is completely wedded to your political beliefs. So it is not an immediate point of distrust when you're meeting someone, so you just have a larger pool of people to choose from. Second of all, people with strongly held beliefs, because their entire social circle tends to be concentrated around this, are just usually more likely to get angry or strike someone down for having different beliefs to them, even if they don't agree with them. I'll take a point of clarification from CEO before moving on.
Yes, please, we want a clean debate. Is retrocausality, meaning the question of what your belief is going to be, retroactively having an indication on what your demographic is likely to be in the debate or not? Is it random who we are born into and the only thing that changes is politics or not? We want a definition.
I would assume so, yes. So I don't really understand POI, but I think it's relatively random, like where you're born into. Second part to this, or why you're likely to be happier, is that you are less coerced by political activism for two reasons. First, because generally, if you have strongly held political beliefs, it is, I think, quite plausible to assume that you're someone who's going to do things like go into grassroots activism or join things like your local Labour Party or your local Liberal Party, because this is something that you're obviously interested in the but there are a couple of reasons why generally going and getting involved in things like political activism is something that tends to be corrosive to your life. And this is because these campaigns tend to be incredibly exploitative for two reasons. First, because political campaigns rely on slave labor functioning, because there's a lot of things that they have to do that are not necessarily profitable. Look to things like door knocking or handing out flyers or like calling people in electorates when there are votes coming off. These are incredibly difficult things that oftentimes require you to give up a lot of your time, and you are more likely to be coerced by the leaders in your community into giving up more of your time when you are someone who is a highly politically motivated person. Second of all, political leaders are more likely to can very easily justify it by saying that this is for the good of the world. For example, in Trump's campaign, how he got people to give up like hours of their time is by going like, oh, by campaigning to me and voting me up, you are going to create a better world. This has huge impact because if you are more coerced into doing a lot of this political activity, it is just incredibly strenuous. You have to give up a lot of your time. It requires you to donate a lot of money as well. It's not good for generally not good for your life. Third reason why you're probably going to be happier is less emotional and sad about political developments. This is because when things happen that maybe you don't necessarily completely agree with, you're likely to be able to at least rationalize it comparatively better against someone who has different sets of beliefs to you. For example, if there's things like tax raising in your country, someone who's like really against having high taxes might be really upset with this because it goes completely against their moral worldview. But someone with a politically centrist worldview is probably going to be able to at least rationalize it comparatively better by being like, perhaps like, welfare state at the moment is what this economy needs, because they're less likely to be wedded to a certain wealth. Fourth reason why it's likely your life is worse is because a lot of political people just kind of suck because they want to rise to the top of the ladder and will do whatever it takes, like working in the Labour Party, or you meet a lot of people who are just generally evil, like people you don't necessarily want to be friends with and will ruin your life. It is far worse to be born with someone with strongly held political beliefs. It makes your life absolutely miserable, incredibly proud to affirm.
All right, I thank the Prime Minister for that speech, inviting the Leader of Opposition.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Great. I will take verbal POIs, starting in 3, 2. 2 points of setup, then 2 arguments. Firstly, I think that probably behind the veil of ignorance, you have no idea what traits will correlate with your political opinions. It's totally random. You're welcome, CO. Secondly, I think that probably OG has misinterpreted what centrist means in this debate because the definition of centrist is contrasted or juxtaposed with having strongly held beliefs. So I don't think this debate is about having extreme political opinions versus moderate political opinions. It's about having weakly versus strongly held political opinions. Moving into the case then. First point on higher level goods and access to them. The first sub point here is you just get more meaning in life on our side for 2 reasons. Firstly, you're much more confident in the actions you undertake on our side. You're not doubtful about your place in the world or if you're right or wrong. You don't have guilt, you don't have shame, you don't have to worry if you're doing the right or wrong thing because you've thought it through and you're certain. This gives you a sense of self-assurance, which allows you to take credit and enjoy your actions. The second reason is that you care strongly and deeply about your political convictions, and this guarantees you a purpose in life. So there are things in the world that you want to change, problems you want to overcome, actions that you can take that will leave you laying in bed satisfied at the end of a day. The second part of this point is about intellectual engagement and community. I think OG concedes a lot of this when they say you're going to seek out like-minded people. We agree. We think people who have political opinions that are more strongly held likely have refined them more, and that's why they're more confident. And that makes them more reflective and more intelligent. This will rub off on you and cause you to reflect and consider your own beliefs more. Secondly, because you're united by a purpose, and I want to directly engage with OG here, it might be harder to find a large quantity of friends, but because the trait that unites you with your friends is much stronger because you have less access to other friends, because you feel like a core part of your values is more shared by the people you associate with, you're likely to have deeper and richer relationships with these people, which means more mutual support, and you get more out of each individual relationship than on side government. I want to note here something that directly engages with, I think, a lot of the material you hear out of opening government, which is that the metric for this point and for this debate is not utilitarianism for two reasons. The first reason is we're behind a veil of ignorance, and we don't know if we're utilitarian or not. There are people in this world who jump on grenades for their fellow comrades, even if that's going to deny them happiness and cause them pain, because they care more about other types in good in life. So we shouldn't assume that happiness or the avoidance of sadness is the preeminent good of this debate. How should we assess the debate instead? We should try to find qualities or characteristics that every human being, not knowing their circumstances in life, would prefer to value. So that means the total assessment of your life is positive, even if your life is filled with pain and suffering. And a core question here is, how are people likely to react to pain or setbacks? So take the example of someone like Vladimir Lenin. Lenin starved, he was shot at, he watched friends die, he was in jail for much of his life. He probably didn't have a very happy existence. And yet I think it's fair to say that he had a meaningful and good existence because by his own communist values, he was very successful at bringing about a desirable world for himself. So I think this probably refutes a great deal of the practical points you hear under people on their side being more happy. Why are our benefits actually intrinsic to human beings, and why are they not subjective and you can have them behind the veil of ignorance? A few notes. Firstly, the ability to have a subjective sense of meaning in life is a prerequisite to any sort of satisfaction or moral value whatsoever. If you believe that the things you are doing are unimportant or arbitrary, or you don't have a guiding value system or sense of conviction, it's impossible to do things that make you feel good, or it's impossible to hold any sort of moral values because you have no idea what you should be doing whatsoever. In terms of community, we think it's important to have a strong community because all humans by evolution have evolved to be social and seek fraternity. And that means strength of relationships is always important. Lastly, on intellectual engagement, and note this will cross-apply to the second argument I'm about to go in, the more reflection you experience over your political beliefs, probably the better off you are, even from behind a veil of ignorance. And the reason for that is, when you consider an issue, you probably can reason about it and try to improve your position on that issue. And that also goes for moral values. And so the more you think and consider and conversate about your moral values, probably the closer they are to maximizing your subjective preferences for what is good in life. So at the point in which you have a circle of friends who's more interested in politics, what you care about, and is more willing to talk to you about these issues, you have more refined values regardless of what those values are. Second argument on more capacity to be moral, note that this flips opening government's first argument. So the thing I want to note here is, firstly, we've already proven to you why these people have more reflective surroundings because of the type of people they're likely to find themselves alongside. The second thing I want to note here is people with strongly held convictions are more likely to seek out challenges from other positions and defend themselves, whereas people who have weakly held positions probably care more about other hobbies and activities and don't seek to actively improve or better their positions. What we think this functionally means then is that the asserted characterization from OG of a person who strongly believes in things as just a demagogue who hasn't thought anything through is structurally unlikely to be the case. And we think probably people on our side have reasoned through their beliefs better. Why is this so important? Because regardless of the moral system you end up adopting, intent is universal to moral systems. We universally understand that a parent who backs over their child in the driveway is not morally culpable, whereas a parent who murders their child is. So on our side of the house, when you've genuinely reflected on the convictions you hold, and you don't have any doubt in your heart, even if you are genuinely wrong, badly wrong about what correct or moral political positions are to hold, you are not morally blameworthy for them because it's not fault that you tried your hardest and you were wrong. But on their side, when you weakly hold positions, they concede by definition that you are aware that the other side might be right, and yet because you don't care about politics enough, you have not sought out the conversations of the reflection that would lead you to resolve that uncertainty. And so every political action that you then take carries the actual knowledge in the actor that you might be doing something wrong. You therefore have intent and therefore the possibility of moral culpability. Insofar as all humans care about morality, that's a point for our side. I'll take a point from CG before I move.
Things change, things take you as an individual differently from your political beliefs. At that point, why would you still go ahead and subscribe to this ideology?
I don't even really know what that means. Like, presumably you can be a person who strongly believes in one thing, and then you could be persuaded to strongly believe in another thing. And I think all of our arguments stand equally in that case as they would in a case where you hold the same strong beliefs throughout your life. So at the end of this speech, I firstly want to note that on weighing, it's going to be difficult for back half to beat us here because we've proven intrinsic benefits that exist behind the veil of ignorance to things like reflection and meaning that cannot be outweighed by mere utilitarian benefits. And don't let other opposition teams or government teams get away with saying things like you might be politically persecuted or whatever. These consequentialist harms have no standing in a debate behind the veil of ignorance. I want to note briefly that the only other thing left standing from opening government is the idea that it's easier to make friends. So I just want to weigh this point out. I think if you think from an intuitive perspective, if it's better to have 20 people that you care about somewhat or a few people you're really close to, probably better to have the latter. The last thing I want to note is they might say you could find other sources of meaning or community. This debate is evaluated on a probabilistic metric. You can be certain you will have meaning or community on our side. You might find it on their side. You might not. For those reasons, proud to.
All right, I thank the leader of opposition for that speech, inviting Deputy Prime Minister.
Let's be clear, everyone agrees about the definition. Clearly, a centrist is someone who has weakly held opinions. That is, that they are not wedded to a certain opinion. For example, you might be wedded to only listening to Taylor Swift, but you don't know when you wake up each day what you're going to listen to. Clearly, you're a centrist, or you are amicable about any other option. That is, that a centrist can still feel strong about their opinions, but they know that they can change those opinions from time to time. Compare it to a strong person. That is a person who has a strongly held opinion. They know what they're going to believe in. They do not believe that they're going to change their opinions at all. That is the reason why I think that their definition claim about this debate is not really happening. Like, clearly this debate is clean enough. Let's talk about their claim about how you feel like crap because you feel as if you have the wrong opinion all the time if you're a centrist. Like the example I gave you about the song, right? Like, you don't know what you're going to listen to each day. Same, likewise, you don't know if you're going to vote for vanilla or chocolate. Clearly, you don't know what you like. Doesn't mean that you feel like total terrible. You don't feel terrible. People know that there is some capacity to change and have the correct decision when it comes down to it. For example, there are people like swing voters, and swing voters vote for the Republican Party and Democratic Party, right wing, left wing, from time to time. Ask yourself, Judge, are these people depressed? Are they throwing themselves off of cliffs? Clearly, these people do not feel like their lives are terrible. They simply believe whichever opinion is the best argued of the moment, that is the one that you would select. But also, there are many centrists in the world. Like, this team believes that everyone has a strong political opinion and we've all sorted ourselves into political camps. That's not true. Most people don't have a political opinion. That is that they are centrist themselves, because A, lots of people do not have access to all the political information to draw a conclusion as to which one to say. But B, most people are actually quite rational and actually are centrist necessarily because they feel unsure about whether or not the things they know are actually the truth. The same way a swing voter thinks, well, maybe I don't know whether or not this person is going to be a good representative, so I'm going to look into the other representative to whether or not I should vote for them. And also, C, most people don't find politics the thing that they should be focusing on in their lives. They focus on their families, they focus on their work, they focus on their friends. So it's unclear that everyone in the world has a strong political opinion. Most people are centrist. Probably you, Judge, are centrist yourself. So it's not clear that these people have such terrible lives if they are the median person. But also, it's clear that you'll feel bad about being a centrist because most people actually laud centrists in the world. Centrists are people who are able to come to an opinion on rationality. They are perceived as wise. They are perceived as patient. They are perceived as not like hammering in a certain opinion. They're not perceived as the left-wing snowflakes who are not open to any immigration discussions. They're not perceived as alt-right people who are completely poisoned by misinformation. It's unclear that being a centrist means that your life is not meaningful, means that your life is sad. I think that most centrists are happy, and that is a ridiculous claim from them. Let's talk about your individual welfare. We explained at Eleanor that your individual welfare is worse if you have a strongly held opinion because you probably have joined a political party, and political parties are likely to be bad places. They are exploitative for a person with strong beliefs. No response from the opposition. We tell you that you are A, coerced because you are happy to do whatever you want, happy to do whatever is necessary to have your political opinions be manifested, and B, you want to rise through the ranks so you're able to take control of the political party, the political apparatus, in order to actually have an effect in the world. So this looks like working long hours that are in campaigning. It looks like doing strenuous work, like consistently door knocking, even though people are abusing you when you not door knock. But it also looks like an exploitation when a political figure says that they want to touch you inappropriately. You close your mouth and say, okay, because you know it's the only way for you to actually action your political opinions. Someone who is centrist is not wedded to their political political opinion actually manifesting, clearly it is more dangerous to be someone who has a strong opinion. This is important because clearly this team does not prove that you would succeed in that political quest that you have ventured out on. So it's not clear what you're doing it for. Why are you sacrificing your actual physical health? Why are you sacrificing your emotional health for this? They don't give us a proper benefit. Closing.
If your wife asks you to join the Women's March and you are undecided about abortions and you tell this to her, do you think her reaction would be, oh, that's very wise and moderate of you? Or would it be, why don't you have my back when I need you most?
Like literally this, unlikely the husband would say no. Like the husband will probably join her even if he's a bit reticent. Like most people make compromises and also divorce their political opinions from their like familial issues. Like I don't understand why a centrist is incapable of being able to dissect and keep their lives discreet from their political opinions. A strongly political person has their emotions hurt when their political opinions are infringed on. So the husband is worse under your side than they are under our side. But also, we think that if you have weakly held political opinions, you are likely to have your choices maximized. That is, your life is better and choice maximization is important in this debate because a person with strongly held opinions is a slave to their ideology. If you're right wing, it means that you cannot marry the person you love because you believe that queerness is wrong. So clearly, you are locked out of the capacity to enter into things that self-actualize. But if you are left wing, maybe you believe in anti-racism, but you know that you actually need to call the police on the black family that is maybe stealing things from your own children. Clearly, you need to do things to protect yourself, to actualize, to benefit yourself, but you refuse to do that because of your strongly held beliefs. This team says, well, Lenin was happy when he was shot in the head. My God, Judge, if you seriously believe that you are like Lenin in this debate, you are absolutely wrong. They say that, well, your friendships are better under their side. Why? We think friendship is exclusive to our side because, one, people don't like people with strongly held views because they are. If you are a person who is another person, like if you talk to this actor, right, you feel like you're constantly being judged if they have a strongly held opinion. So you feel as if everything you say is going to be judged. So a person with strongly held beliefs actually alienates people a lot, and that is the reason why they can't get deep relationships with other people. But also, this actor does not like people with different positions, so they don't do things like, even if they might be attracted to someone in the counterfactual on the outside, they don't go into that relationship with them, whether that be romantic or platonic. But also, if you are someone with a strongly held opinion, your friendships that you're selecting are not diverse. Like if you are right wing, you're probably going to pick people who are entirely honest because right wing people prefer, voicing opinions and being honest, but they don't pick people who are kind. They don't pick people who are maybe dauntless or creative, which therefore means you lock yourself out of a diversity of relationships. And the quality of your relationships is told by the diversity because it enriches your character. It means that there are multiple people to be there for different aspects and different circumstances of your life. You have fewer friends, which is a high impact benefit in this debate, harm in this debate. Because if you have fewer friends, you literally go against what it means to be a human being. No human is ever happy if they have fewer relationships. It is a biological fact. Therefore, if you have less relationships, less meaningful relationships under the opposition side, they should lose. But ultimately, don't be a slave to your opinions, just have weakly held beliefs. Cheers.
All right, I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech, inviting Thielo.
Give me a second to get my notes together. Before I start, I just want to thank Max for being a wonderful partner. It's 5:25 a.m. here in Toronto, and I think he's at 2 or 3 a.m. in Alberta. And in spite of that, this has been a ton of fun, really great. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Government's world is a colorless, valueless world where you should never believe firmly in anything because you might risk or sacrifice something. We don't stand for it. We don't stand for it as people and as debaters. Therefore, proud to oppose. Off the top, MMO doesn't define what centrism is, and they didn't take my point of clarification asked them to. What does Max tell you that the DPM agrees with? He says that centrism looks like moderately held rather than beliefs. I think overwhelmingly with centrist beliefs, people with centrist beliefs tend to support the status quo. At the point at which the status quo is harming you, your desire to escape it won't be moderate, it'll be intense, not making you a centrist. We agree with DPM that most people are centrist, that centrism is an inherently majoritarian position at the point at which the center is politically defined as the median of what people in a society believe. Why is self-actualization the most important metric in the round? Why does this come logically prior to CA? We know that people in the real world adopt non-consequentialist value systems. Consider the substantial fraction of people who would not sacrifice one patient to take their organs and save 5 others, or the people who sacrifice their lives and their happiness for others. Therefore, I think behind the veil of ignorance, it's unclear if maximizing for consequentialist values is something that you're going to care about in your life. But I think, therefore, the metric of this debate must be on the impacts that exist regardless of your moral philosophy, not consequentialism alone, like OG talks about. Meaning that it's necessary that means what I mean to say is meaning is necessary to have any sort of values whatsoever, insofar as you need to believe things are true and important to reach out for them. I think this guarantees you meaning. Self-reflection is necessary to improve upon your values and synchronize them better in your life, which is another benefit that we uniquely secure on Earth. Community and deep friendships is as necessary as food for human beings who are evolved to rely on strong sociocultural networks. All people care about some sort of morality, and all systems of morality emphasize the importance of intentionality and moral wrongdoing. This is Max's example about backing over your child with a car. I think if you genuinely believe what you're doing is right, you act without intention to do wrong and are at least morally neutral. On their side, centrists operate with the knowledge that the other side might be right, but without the courage or inclination to decide for sure. More on this later. They therefore neglect their moral responsibility to investigate their values and intentionally open themselves up to the possibility of wrongdoing. Almost everything DPM says, and I guarantee you most of what you're going to hear in back half is unresponsive to this metric upon which the debate must be judged. I want to talk briefly about retrocausality as well. I think we might hear out of CO that having certain types of political beliefs means that you're more likely to be a certain type of person. I think Max has told you why this shouldn't be perfect. But even if it is, I think that this argument on self-actualization weighs much heavily over this. I think the most important trait you can have is being self-actualized about what you believe in, about having moral standing beyond being a centrist. Okay, but even if you don't buy that metric, I'm going to prove why we win on a utilitarian metric on some other metrics as well. On utilitarianism and the quality of political beliefs. I'm taking POIs verbally, by the way. I can't see the chat. Like, are you going to be an ardent donor to Donald Trump or a leftist who fights for vulnerable minorities? What does a good political belief look like? It's one that's empathetic and it's one that's collectivist rather than individual. I think these are core to the principles of utilitarianism. We think almost everyone at their core supports these things because humans are fundamentally good. I think the reason why people might not support these things is if they're victimized by misinformation and don't understand why it is their beliefs hurt people, or they don't understand the scale at which their beliefs cause harm. They fail to properly consider the humanity of the people who are impacted by what they stand for. Just preempting a possible back half argument from CG on this, people who have harmful political beliefs from the jump have probably been victimized by misinformation or by lack of considering the scale of harms based on their parents or environment. How do we avoid this? Importantly, this motion is about what your political beliefs are at their conception. I think being a centrist means being content with the status quo. At the point at which the status quo is serving you, there's no reason to interrogate it. OG says, people will be able to see both sides of arguments. It takes active work to engage in the political process, to have political discussions, to study up on political issues. I'm unclear as to why you would do this work if you don't want anything to change, if your involvement won't make a meaningful difference. This is most often not, and secondly, I would say, this is most often not a good thing. OG says, you'll have a nuanced opinion on whether or not a country should take refugees. If you look at Australia, where the alternative is massively overcrowded and oppressive refugee camps set up on Melanesian islands, this isn't an issue you should have any nuance on. You should support taking in refugees and vote and advocate to that end. Sorry, I'm a snowflake. Not only is this a utilitarian harm at the broad scale when it comes to how people vote, it also affects your individual relationships at the point at which you're non-committal on everything. Max already tells you why that's true. Having strong political beliefs also means that you're likely to have to defend them to most people, since most people tend not to have radical beliefs. I think defending them means you have to be informed about the issues of the day and how your ideology impacts them. You're more likely to be able to engage in critical discourse about politics. This ultimately allows you to escape things that lead to people into radical politics that are individualistic harmful, or bigoted. And it also means, and this is really important, that this means you can change. If the circumstances around your beliefs change, you're better positioned to change your belief than a centrist because one, you're in touch with what's happening and you know that it's taking place. And two, you're more used to engaging with your political beliefs in a critical way because you're challenged more. Now on your personal well-being. This argument about working for a political party. There's tons of ways to work towards political beliefs. Direct action, voting for a political party or making a donation, the way you choose to live your life, and how you treat people around you. For all of the reasons that OG gave, I think most people probably do these things rather than working for a political party. But even to the degree to which this motivates a small majority of people to join a party, I think it's A, good for society that they're highly motivated to help their party succeed, because then their party will be better at governing, and B, not guaranteed that their experience will be miserable. If they choose to work for a party, they probably know it didn't pay well and did it because it means working for candidates who they will believe in to get elected. I work for political parties a lot. It's really good. Preempting likelihood of censorship. Even as a young person, you can have political beliefs and know that shutting up about them is necessary if you live in a repressive regime. Also, as Max did, weigh this versus self-actualization. Lastly, responding to the material on friends. OG is like, you're going to have no friends. You might have fewer friends, but there'll be deeper relationships, right? I think Max also implicitly tells you that people with stronger political beliefs are more reflective. I think this means that you're going to be able to find compromise and belonging even with people whose beliefs are different than yours. I think mine and Max's partnership is an example of that. I'm unclear as to how centrists in their world become friends with people with radical political beliefs who expect them to have stronger opinions. I don't know how I can see someone as someone with radical political beliefs because I support refugees, someone who says, well, I can really see the argument for deporting them off to like Nauru. Like, I don't know how I can be friends with that person. I think at best for Gov, it's symmetric. For all these reasons, so proud to oppose.
All right, I think the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that speech, inviting member of government.
Starting in 30. I hope I'm clearly audible. And just a second, I'll turn on. Our peers, I'll ask for one myself, and I'll take one for sure this time from the closing. Yep, Medhavini going as member. Setting up my timer. Try my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think the biggest problem in top half is probably not characterizing this debate as what your value system are as somebody behind the veil of ignorance, which means substantially both the teams argue on how you whether want to support political centrism or strong political views in status quo without engaging with the frame of this debate. I think it looks like two things, right? Firstly, if you probably don't know your social position, economic status, natural right, intelligence, gender, race, etc., I think this largely becomes a lot of markers based on which you form a strong political opinion in the first place. Things like abortion right, things like economic status, social position, etc., are intermingled by being inherently connected. Why? Because this appeals to your identities. This inherently becomes like a part of a part of your daily routine and things like that. Which means inherently, then a lot of times the way that you form these stronger opinions are based on your information to all of these things. At a point of time that does not happen, I'm unsure as to why even having strong opinions is possible in the first place. The second thing I want to talk about is behind a veil of ignorance. It's also the fiat to assume that things like education, personal experiences, media circle, etc., are also largely missing, which means the actor probably right now is taking this decision without external sort of influences at large, which means then we probably need to frame the value system of what you hold as most proximate based on not having any prior experiences for all of these things that have characterized you in the first place. The second observation that I generally want to make is that even the OG defines it clearly in terms of what the definition of
of political centricism is being challenged by OO. In political centricism, you probably are likely to make far more trade-offs. And that is the only thing, like as an average voter, you can buy, right? Because when you have strong political opinions, these become inherent to the way that you view your value system and identities, which means you don't want to make trade-offs. So if you're pro-abortion, you're less likely to engage with somebody who's anti-abortion because you strongly hold that in the first place. Or in political centricism, you're likely to look beyond these things in a far more holistic manner. I think this is the only definition that should probably stand within this round. Then, what are extension? Firstly, I think OO is able to beat OG on the idea of community because OG is not able to characterize to you, like in all likelihood, like how does it end up happening or like the mechanization to the same. But they only simply say that, oh, it's better because like you will concede to a lot of things. I'll give a better mechanization to that. Secondly, I'll clash with like opening opposition because I'm gonna talk more about self-actualization. Thirdly, I'm gonna talk about the idea of working in political activity and how you engage with that, right? So firstly, let's talk about like creation of community groups, etc. I think it's insofar I've proved to you that your value system is probably shaped behind this veil of ignorance. Forming community is the most important thing. Why? Because as individuals, you need security. It's an innate human desire to probably form social circles. Humans are anti-social beings, which means it becomes a tipping point, the most important thing as an individual, like behind the veil of ignorance, right? At that point of time, what makes you able to form like better connection? I think the first thing to talk about then is the ability to go ahead and like make compromises. That is the inherent value of like political centricism. At a point in time, you're probably not stuck at certain beliefs. You're able to flip more to the community needs. You're able to flip more to the needs of the context, which means people inherently like you more. Your social circles like you more. The second thing to talk about generally about like political centricism is the idea of social inclusivity, right? A lot of times in status quo, the reason that you don't want to make deeper connections is because of certain agenda that you hold very proximate. This might look like racist agenda, how people are skeptic of like people with different identities around them, right? So engagement within intersectionality is largely limited. But the problem with that is not even engagement in numeracy, but you consistently being skeptic of like opinions or motives of other people, because this dilemma is created insofar you have strong political opinion based on identities or all of these other markers, right? Which means there's always inhibition when it comes down to forming deeper social connections or even interact in the first place. I think this goes away in terms of political centricism because you uphold the value of social inclusivity. What is the weighing for this and why are bonds likely to be stronger? Firstly, I think on numeracy, OG like does a fair enough job. But the problem is just on the idea of explaining what this trade-off look like. The second thing, and this is a typical point, is in the idea of value of friendships, right? I think there are three markers to that. Firstly, I think connection on an individual level are shaped more on the trust that two peoples are likely to build on themselves. At a point of time, I'm proving to you why like compromises are likely to exist more on our side of the house. We believe connection on these individual level enhances. But secondly, at all points in time, there's overlap of multiple political values, right? So if you have strong political values about X thing, somebody might have different values about like Y things, etc. Which means it's very unlikely that you're able to find like a huge community with absolutely same strong political opinions. Insofar there's no inherent there's a spectrum within right and spectrum within left. I'm unsure as to why skepticism also does not exist like within the spectrum of right and left in the very first place, which means on the idea of somebody being able to validate your political opinion, that's largely limited. But thirdly, in terms of having long-term bonds, I think any long-term bond or sustenance of bond has to go beyond like political ideas, etc. Which means even if you want to value them in certain connections or certain degree of communication, things like that, a lot of times the way that you want to have holistic bonds like goes beyond reasons that are political. At a point of time on opposition's paradigm, you're not able to look beyond these political ideas. I'm unsure as to why you're able to engage with other people based on other things, right? Which means value of relationship is far better outside the house. The second thing to talk about is self-actualization. I think it's too weighing to be done in self-actualization because it is not over-characterization that you want to have like a strong opinion on certain things and that gives you self-actualization. I think there are two things to that. Firstly, there's an innate desire that you feel to be liked, right? Which means it boosts your self-esteem and confidence if you get a lot of validation from people around you. Which means at all points of time, you don't want to be in a like situation of turmoil. You don't want to feel outcast. You likely want to be like exist in communities and things like that. The second thing to talk about in self-actualization is the innate value that you associate to openness to new experiences. What is the intuition pump here? Humans are inherently curious and want to question things, which means you invented things like fire, wheel, etc. by simply questioning natural norms of nature, things like that, right? Which means humans inherently want to engage with newer concepts. Having strong political opinions inhibit your your capacity to go ahead and engage with these different concepts. The reason for that is at all points of time, extreme political opinion want you to probably not acknowledge racism for that matter, simply because it might go against your rightist agenda on identity and things like that. Which means it inhibits you from questioning openly, and it inhibits you to probably stuck to the way that you're conditioned in general by media, parents, etc. I think that this like devalues the way that you're able to self-actualize. It's not true, like on opening opposition's paradigm, that only having strong political opinion like inherently leads to that. They never give you mechanizations to that. There are two impacts to that. Firstly, the way that you deal with like guilt in general, and this is opening half clash, is that you have an ability to go ahead and actively correct yourself. On opposition's paradigm, you probably cannot change because you have things like image incentives or PR incentives because you strongly held these political values. On our side of the house, you're probably able to take accountability better and you're able to deal with this guilt better. But secondly, in terms of family being proximate connection, etc., you probably don't want to see larger degree of turmoils within these families, right? When it comes down to self-actualization, because in political extremism, it's likely that you're probably engaged with threats to family and things like that. On our side, is far more safe, which means that like these connections, you're less likely to see backlash of these connections, right? And the last thing to talk about is generally in terms of like self-actualization by being a mediator between two extreme political opinions, which is valued most in society. For all these reasons, we believe that your community life is better, and so is your ability to go ahead and self-actualize. For these reasons, somebody who's behind the veil of ignorance, you value these things and you get that better on CG.
All right, I think the member of government for that speech, inviting the member of opposition.
Yeah. So starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, a few pieces of rebuttals to closing government before I move on to our unique comparative extension, right? We don't need people to have exact same political opinions as ours. If we are from the same camp and go on protest together, we focus on our arrangements more than our disagreements, right? In the Women's March, you had women who support abortion throughout pregnancy and those who only support first term, right? But all were strongly united against overturning Roe v. Wade. We also think that member of government asserts centrists reach compromises with their opinionated peers. People who feel strongly about their ideology tend to try and convince you, and you feel hurt when you don't, and they feel hurt when you don't seem convinced, right? Consider all the LGBT Americans who said, if you vote for Trump, you vote against me, right? It's too personal to compromise, and hence the assertion of member of government doesn't stand as such, right? Coming to our extension, we will show that a person with strongly held beliefs has much higher self-esteem. My whip will weigh why it is the most important metric in the debate, right? Okay. 7 reasons why a person who has strong political beliefs will have higher self-esteem than a centrist. In the scenario of you being a centrist, your friends from both aisles try to change your mind and prove you that you are wrong, right? They often blame and judge you for not taking a side and not doing it. On the flip side, if you're a radical, if you're a person with strong political beliefs, your friend groups is likely to be an echo chamber, and hence you get constant reformations from them that you are on the right side of history, you got it right, and they tap on your shoulder for going to protest and voting right every point of time, right? Secondly, as opening government says, in the case of you being a centrist, you question your beliefs and change them more. This means you admit to mistakes and flaws more often, and you look at your past self and cringe. You might feel guilt over having voted wrong beforehand, itself, right? But on the flip side, if you see for a person with strong political beliefs, you remain firm in your belief and have provided that this debate happens behind the veil of ignorance, the likelihood of you being proven wrong is extremely low. So you always think that you're absolutely accurate with your political ideology, your political beliefs, which factors into you as a person in our side of the house be feeling better about yourself always, right? Thirdly, you being a centrist question yourself all the time, right? You're never sure that you got it right because you're less strongly holding your belief, you're less strongly holding your political belief, and you have changed it before also, right? Which is contingent on the fact that centrist people change it more often. You feel like you might be wrong, and you always feel like you're not informed enough, right? Whereas on the comparative, on our side of the house, as a person with strong political beliefs, there is very less probability of your ideology being proven wrong. You always vote for the person who is representing your same belief, same person every time. So there's no instance of you questioning your belief, which is so central for your various aspects of life. And henceforth, you remain confident and satisfied with your decisions at every point of time, right? Fourthly, as a centrist, every time you vote a wrong or corrupt political leader into office, you blame yourself for electing that official in the first place because you're not so strong in your beliefs, which translates to your weak trust in the candidate who's propagating that belief, and hence question yourself for your decisions after such instances of political leader doing something wrong, such as corruption or wrong decisions in and of itself. On the flip side, in our side of the house, because of your strong belief, you have immense and unbreakable or blind trust on the candidate that propagates your political belief. So you never really let external factors question your decision, even if the candidate did something wrong, right? In a world where every career politician does something wrong, irrespective of their belief that they are representing, you point fingers to causation of a particular problem to some external factor, right? Even if they are unrelated, and live with a sense of immense satisfaction and security that you are living under the governance of a right candidate that any centrist would ever have. And because you feel that this sense of satisfaction stems from your decision and political belief, you have higher self-esteem. Even in the counter case, if you are a person with strong belief and the state you belong to is ruled by a person representing opposite political beliefs, you are more likely to be living in an echo chamber of your own political belief itself, and discussing what's wrong with the state of current government, and hence feel like you're the rational one with a bunch of other rational people like you trying to change the irrational people that have the opposite ideology as you. Still, in this case, you feel like you're better than most of the people, right? Fifthly, for opening government, you as a centrist are very less likely to partake in activism. So you feel politically uninvolved whenever something happens in politics that you disagree with, you feel like you didn't do anything to stop it. And on the comparative, in our side of the house, unlike opening opposition, we don't say you have to be lenient, but the fact that you try your best, even if for the average person, it's not to serve in parliament, but to join a protest and donate to the right cause and trying to convince people around you, you feel like you did your best, right? You get to pat yourself on the back for trying to improve society. Even if you don't reach your desired result and society lets you down, you don't let yourself down, and you can at least now you know that you did everything you can stop to and blame someone else. And in this case also, you don't blame yourself as a person with strong political beliefs, right? Sixthly, as a centrist, political movements actively try to make you feel bad for not joining them, right? For not joining those radical political movements on either sides. This is why people who don't vote are often shamed. And then as a centrist, you're more likely to be always shamed because of your centrist ideologies. On the flip side, in our side of the house, political movements try actively to make people who follow them feel good for following them and feel like they are a better person for this, right? This is why the narratives and propaganda involve a lot of ego boosting, presenting the narrative as the fight of good versus evil, telling you your role models would be proud of you. For example, the troops that died in the service of this country did it precisely because of the beliefs people like you are fighting for, right? And seventhly, in comparison to others, as a person with centrist political opinion, you treat all different views with equal respect and often feel like you are the losing argument against your more opinionated friends who come more heated and better informed about what they care deeply about, right? You assess your own value in comparison to others. This harms your self-esteem. On the comparative, we judge our others who are on the other side of the aisle, and we always have this holier than thou feeling, hence always have better self-esteem than the centrist. So proud of both. Thank you.
Right, I thank the member of opposition for that speech, inviting the government whip.
I am clearly audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Wait, let me just switch my microphone. Still audible? Sorry about that.
Yeah, you're still audible.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. POIs in chat. I'll take one from opening, preferably around 5:30. Don't unmute until I ask you to do so. Um, all right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. 3 things in the speech. Firstly, weighing over off benches on ideas of guilt and self-esteem. Secondly, why we're logically prior to opening government. Thirdly, unique benefits that will win us the extension on closing government. Right. Firstly, let's take with what closing oppositions like member just told us in the last second of their speech. Right. They say that political movements will shame you if you go ahead and will push and pull and tug on you that why you're not doing enough. I think inside a veil of ignorance, probably that argument is framed out primarily because you don't know if the entire world is just centrist outside in the real world. So the entire world might not be conservative or heavily democratic in the first place. So I'm not entirely sure what the scale of this pushing and pulling will be onto you. Primarily, if the world is mostly centric. So I don't really think in that scenario, you probably can posit that this argument then holds scale in any points of time. But let's just weigh over benches completely because their idea on starting from opening opposition is that you'll have less guilt because you deeply believe in your ideology, and closing opposition tries to make that out by saying that you have echo chambers and you create self-esteem. I just want to posit that this is very counterintuitive because note the guilt of any action that you do in society is not something that always stems from your own moral conscience. It's something the society also forces onto you. So you might be like person who comes from the queer community and you might be shamed for those things and you might feel guilty and opt for just playing or acting like you're conforming to heteronormative norms, right? That means that guilt in of itself is something that is forced onto you, sometimes manufactured for you by society. So it doesn't always mean that it comes from within you. The ability for you to go ahead and change those kind of situations, the ability for you to go ahead and undo or redo your actions in the first place, make you deal with guilt better and make you have less regret, because now you're not you're not thinking that I was locked into one ideology which I couldn't even change. I think the ability for you to rectify your mistakes, the ability for you to take accountability on yourself and go ahead and change the way that you initially opted for is something that takes away the guilt on our side of the house. What happens in the comparative? When you're locked into one ideology, your ability to move is immensely restricted because of multiple reasons that off benches themselves give, right? Firstly, you have strong, deep connections and you have echo chambers. That means it's very difficult to break out of those echo chambers. But secondly, you have PR incentives and you have image incentives of politicians. Note, and this is the framing of this debate altogether, because the most important thing. All politicians opt into politics because they want to always control their ideology in the manner that they want to do and not be dictated by everyone else. They want to push an ideology into the entire world and they want to be in control of that ideology, and that's why they opt into politics. That means when on opposition, you have negative PR because you switch sides or you jump ships from say Democrat or Republican to going to another stronger side. I think the ability for you to go ahead and just break out of this cycle is immensely difficult. So you can't ever go ahead and rectify mistakes on their side of the house. That means that the guilt is probably going to be more on off benches, primarily because you have no escape route out of guilt in times when things go sour at any point of time, because you will be called a fickle politician and not someone who can stick to their belief. If you're a centrist, you can take more moral accountability because people know that they inherently that you're not someone who has a strong side, so you can go ahead and conveniently pick and choose sides on multiple issues. You can be a Democrat when it comes to economics, so you can be a Republican when it comes to social schemes, right? You can have those kind of balances on our side of the house. That means people believe that you are balancing it, and the shame that's pushed on you by society, the guilt pushed on you by society is much and much lesser. Secondly, O says that you have stronger bonds with people, and this is where I want to do one better than opening government, right? Because they say that you'll have more friends, but they never actually deal with the idea of opening opposition, which is about having stronger bonds. There are two responses which flips this argument. Firstly, I think when you have stronger bonds with only a certain of individuals, the ability for you to find individuals with likely characteristics is much and much lesser because you have a smaller circle. So since you are behind a veil of ignorance, you don't know what your preferences will be. But considering that most conservatives are rich white men who come from similar backgrounds, and most Democrats are people who are minorities or kind of things, I think those things become immensely difficult for you to put yourself into, and that pushes a high premium or barrier onto you to even this thing in the first place. But secondly, I think if you have stronger bonds on opposition benches, the ability for you to concede or concede or even look at the downsides of your side is something that's very, very restricted, and that means that that means that when things might change. So you might feel like something that's hit home, like your own son is queer if you're a conservative. At that point, your calculus might change because things are dynamic in political systems. When that happens, your ability to go ahead and concede to those things or see flaws within your friends is much and much lesser if you have stronger bonds on opening opposition's case. That's exactly why we are okay with the trade-off of having like more friends and less deeper meaningful connections, because at least we are able to go ahead and pick what our preferences are when it comes to friends, but also we're not locked into by ideologies or echo chamber that closing opposition wants to posit on their side of the house, right? Why are we logically prior to opening government? Because opening government says that we want to have friends and have social connections and we want to be valued and have validation. But that's a consequence of this motion of itself. When you go ahead and pick this side, the reason why you go ahead and pick this side is something that they never prove. I'm going to give you 6 reasons of why individuals want to go ahead and opt into community validation and mass appeal that they always want to do, which comes from you being a centrist. Firstly, you have confirmation bias towards your own opinion that's inherent to human beings because self-preservation instincts, and they would never want to go ahead and be switched because they do things like guilt and shame. Secondly, you have community support, psychological and emotional fulfilled, primarily because you go ahead and you information, your ideology gets reinforced by individuals. We have more like even closing opportunities of just emotional fulfillment by your ideology being resilient by a lot of people because you're some centrist and you do things in a balance. Thirdly, belonging and security. This is the innate survival instinct of human beings, which means that the social being nature of human beings means that you always want to go top for things that are on scale in terms of you going ahead and like having a larger pool of audience. Before I get into the last 3 reasons, sure.
Our points on community works because we prove humans have an innate desire for some level of close connection. Your arguments about being widely liked might be commonly valued, but they're not so intrinsic to assume that nobody could prefer something else, so they're inherently uncertain.
So they prefer something else, and the bond wasn't probably as deep, so you have to pick a side on that. If bonds are deep, you probably can't move out of those bonds, because if you do, your bonds will break and that will hurt you even more. So I think on our side, if you change sides, the hurt is much lesser. Fourth reason why the comparison with other politicians on our side probably doesn't exist, because you're now not as a Democrat to like say a Republican, right? On our side, also satisfaction and fulfillment of this particular politician's job is much more on our side of the house. That means you are in more control of your ideology. You can from your job in of itself. That means you have things like less ostracization also. But fifthly, hero worship and all those kind of things and the drive to power that social media also pushes onto you, something that's innately true. So you probably know the kind of like hero worship people. So expanding a thing on scale, expanding your social circle on scale, or the kind of the audience on scale and of itself is beneficial to you, because these things are something that they tap into the most innate desires of human being, which is bereft of the idea of ignorance. On our side of the house, you're not logged into your position as what happened on opposition benches. Secondly, you're able to deal with guilt much better. That means your self-esteem and your mental health is present much better closing comments, as opposed to our benches where you are locked into ideology. So ideology is something that's hit, you cannot change, and that's really bad for these people for all those reasons.
All right, thank you, Government Whip, for that speech, inviting the opposition whip.
Hey, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Cool. Usual drill. I think you heard me say this by now, but I sometimes have glitches. If I stop being audible, let me know. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. This is a very, very speculative debate. Behind the veil of ignorance, we know nothing about what it's going to be in our life. We don't know which country we are born to. We don't know which friends we're going to have. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they loyal? We'll probably replace them several times throughout our lives as well. We don't know which job we are going to get. We don't know which wife or husband or any spouse at all we're going to have in life. We don't know if we'll have the opportunities to do proper activism and run for politics, or if we'll be too disenfranchised for this. There is one thing that is certain in this debate. We know we want to be liked. We know we want to like ourselves. We know we want to like the image we see in the mirror. The one thing that every individual has is their ego. And what I'm going to do in this speech is prove 2 things. 1, I'm going to prove that the single most important metric in this debate, simply through weighings, is your self-esteem. 2, I'm going to show why Vishwa decisively won the question on self-esteem. Let's start with weighing why this is by far the most important metric. Firstly, self-esteem is the lens through which we interpret everything else and any other metric that was run in this debate. Think about it for a sec. When we are thinking of something like, are we successful in life? This is highly subjective. Someone might feel successful when they get a raise, and someone might feel not successful enough because they didn't live up to their parents' dreams. When we ask ourselves, if we are happy with our social lives, it's not about how many friends we have or if we have many fights. It's about, do we feel like we are a good person? Do we feel subjectively liked? It doesn't matter if people really like us. It only matters if we think they like us. It doesn't matter if we have many fights, as long as we feel we were on the right side of them, that we don't have guilt to feel after them, that we are the one on the right. Similarly, even if we take the OO metric of meaning, this is also very reliant and looked through at the prism of self-esteem. Meaning can be negative. That is, my source of meaning, if I feel like I don't fulfill it, would be a negative meaning. If it derives meaning from my family, but I feel like a bad mother because I don't spend enough time with my kids, I'm not going to feel meaningful in my life, even though I have a source of meaning. This is why OO just analyzing, you have a source of meaning this way, without showing why it will impact you in a good way, cannot win over us. Your self-esteem, you feeling that you're doing enough for your sense of meaning, is the part that attains. Second reason why it's the most important metric in this debate. It is the vast majority of the time of your life, for two reasons. One, most of our time of the day, we spend with ourselves in our mind. We talk to ourselves more than we talk to any other person. We are our single biggest friend and enemy. We can never run away from ourselves. This is why the way we view ourselves is much more important than how other people perceive us, or way more important than how objectively successful we are in life. The second reason why it's true is because it's the most consistent throughout time aspect in our life. When we grow old, our social environments change. Our friends change, our jobs change, our activism changes. OO's point on meaning as well. We cannot continue going on protests when we are 80. But our sense of being a good person, our ego, stays with us forever. Third piece of weighing. It is also logically prior to a large extent to how external factors around us play effect. If we feel good about ourselves, have a high self-esteem and confidence, it is likelier that society will treat us better as well, right? If I feel like I come from a place of conviction, someone who disagrees with me, even if they dislike me for disagreeing with me, can at least respect me more because they see that I am confident of where I'm coming from and willing to make sacrifices for my belief. Whereas if I come insecure into an argument, I will seem insecure. I will seem weak, uninformed. I will blabber. This is when people disrespect us. Lastly, this is the most inherent thing in this debate. When so many things are going to change, just per my framing, when so much is speculative, the one thing we know is that we will have our egos and our own internal introspection process. Why does Vishwa win this clash? First, he had 7 reasons, but let's see the actual rebuttals and preemptions we got to them. 1, we hear from both governments, most people in the world are centrists, and this is attempting to engage our point on you'll get positive reaffirmations for being radical. 2 observations. 1, complete assertion that most of the world is centrist. I think it's quite wrong. Tribalism is quite strong. Because of the strong incentives of political parties to make people loyal to them, they encourage non-centrism, so we have no idea where this assertion comes from. Secondly, it doesn't even matter. Even if it is true that most of the world is centrist, the loudest people aren't. And this is what Vishwa analyzed. The point is that just like governments concede, centrists are less critical and judgmental of people who disagree with them. This is what Oji said, their words. They are less likely to judge you for not being a centrist. Vishwa showed that people who are radical in your own echo chamber, and Oji concedes you're in an echo chamber, so you don't interact much with the people who disagree with you and don't feel judged by them, will give you constant positive reaffirmations and boost your ego so that you get constant feeling that you are better than them. Well, better than the other side, that is. Before I move on, opening.
Being a slave to strong and unmovable beliefs is a threat to your fundamental welfare and adaptation to change. Weigh that against an intense harm, against feeling shame, and also this immoral benefit that you're proffering.
I'm timing this. I'm giving it the 15 seconds. Look, 2 things. 1, we just don't think you can change most of these things in life. Even if I change my political views and the world around me changes, what power does it have? I go on protests every week for the past 6 months to protest against the judicial reform in my government. Did it change anything? No, because I'm an individual. I can't change the government. What it did do is make me feel better, because when the government is going to still fuck me, at least I know I did everything in my power to stop that, and I can tell this to my kids. This is the point. This is in your power, whereas changing the world is not. What is the other response we hear? That ability to rectify mistakes is higher when you are a centrist, and this is why you feel less guilt. 2 points. One, you can't rectify mistakes. You can change your future actions. But if I voted for a politician that I now realize is a bad politician, I can never undo that. I have to live with the guilt. Secondly, under our side, you just don't feel you made a mistake. Who cares if you did? Your subjective perception is that you are always on the right side of history. Beg you to oppose.
All right, I think the op-ed for that fine speech that concludes this debate. Thank you everyone for the round. I think the judges will move into room 2 for the deliberation, because I think room 1 is having a debate. Anyways, thank you everyone. Yeah.